My name is Carl Falconer, and I am the CEO at the Taskforce for Ending Homelessness. I would like to tell you a little about myself before we get started. I'm an Army veteran. I have a master's degree in public administration, and I've been working in the homeless response system for 29 years now. Actually, a little more than 29 years, almost 30. My past positions have included outreach worker, which is where I actually started my career. I've been the director of housing programs multiple times. I was the vice president of a large emergency shelter, and I also was the CEO of a continuum of care lead agency that oversaw the entire homeless response system. So other than letting you know that I'm old, as you can see, I have a lot of experience dealing with homelessness. Now let me tell you a little bit about Taskforce. Taskforce was started by a person who was formerly homeless, Courtney, and has been around for 20 years. Our mission at Taskforce is to get our homeless neighbors off the street and to help them get home. Our values include honesty, quality, empathy, and responsiveness. Our guiding principle really is to meet people where they are. Before we get into the presentation, I would also like to thank our sponsors of this event, South State Bank, Neighbors for Neighbors, and LAN Infotech. I am here today to talk to you about homelessness in Broward County. The purpose of the address today is to collectively review the data, to give an honest assessment of our system, and to stimulate community discussion in hopes that we can help make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring in our community. Most of the suggestions I will make will be mine, but they are backed by data and years of experience. As a community, there are two specific goals we are trying to achieve: to become the best continuum of care in the country and to end homelessness in Broward County. In our field, there are several definitions and abbreviations that we use. Here are a few of them that I will be using in my presentation today, and don't worry about trying to read them all or get them all in before I change the slide. Since a recording of this presentation will be available to you later, you will have plenty of time to go back and review any of these that you don't understand during this presentation. Let me give you just a few of them, or in layman's term, what a few of these mean. The COC, or continuum of care, is really just our entire response system that deals with homelessness. Emergency shelter is pretty self-explanatory. Transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing are just different types of housing programs that help people get off the streets. HUD, obviously, most people know what that is. It's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and usually we'll refer to that whenever we talk about anything federal or anything federal that can be done. Public housing authorities run the housing authorities' subsidized units of housing in our communities. And finally, chronically homeless is a subset of people who are homeless that have extensive issues. And as you can see here, they have to be at least a year homeless and have a disability. Now let's start with some of the data we have collected recently about homelessness. Every year, the continuum of care is asked by HUD to do a count and a survey of all the people who are homeless in their community. This is conducted in the last week of January each year and led by Broward County and Taskforce staff with help from community volunteers. Let's look at the results of the count this year. For our point-in-time count for 2023, we found 1,624 people who were homeless out on the streets or unsheltered. There were 863 people currently in a sheltered environment, and that leads us to a total of 2,487 people. As you can see for the year, unfortunately, our change from last year was up 12.2% in our total homeless population. We also had an increase of 4.4% in the sheltered homelessness and 32.2% in unsheltered homelessness. Unfortunately, we did not collect as much family data as we would have liked during the point in time count, but here's some other data we have collected recently, and as bad as it looks for individuals, it may be worse for families right now. As you can see, in all of 2022, Taskforce had contact with 239 families that were literally out on the streets of Broward County. But through May, only 5 months of this year, we've already seen 193 families out on the street. And the most recent data from our coordinated entry process tells us that there are 173 families on a priority list waiting for housing, but it can take as much as 12 months for them to actually be referred to that housing option. And since January, an average of 87 new families have been referred to housing for our system. This slide shows the number of surveys we were able to complete during the point in time count this year. And as you can see, we attempted to get 1,906 of the people that we counted or talked to, and we actually conducted a survey with 1,523 of them total. Now we'll go to the unsheltered homeless counts by city to give you a view of what it looks like city by city. I'm not going to go over every single one of these cities, but I do want to point out that there are some things here or some trends that we can look at that will be useful for us to work on services. As you can see, there was a lot of movement in the top 4 areas. Increases in Fort Lauderdale, decreases in Hollywood and Lauderhill and Pompano Beach, but you can see that there were increases and decreases throughout the entire system. As we continue down and we look at less populated areas, you can see again, there are increases and there are decreases as we go down the list. Finally, when we get to the last slides, what you'll notice is that in some places where we did not count anybody in 2022, we were actually finding people this year. So if we look at the city by city highlights, there were 15 cities that saw an increase in homelessness, 12 cities that saw a decrease in homelessness. The airport saw an increase in homelessness there. The top 4 cities remained consistent. But what this tells us in the city by city view is that homelessness is affecting the entire county. It also tells us that homelessness is fluid and it moves around throughout the county. Literally, when we were doing point in time count, if someone walked across the street, it would have moved their homeless status from one city to the other city. And that's going to be important when we talk about solutions and we talk about why everyone needs to be involved in this situation. And if you don't think that homelessness can have a significant effect on cities, just take a look at some recent information that I read about San Francisco. Their office vacancy rates hit a historic 29.4% in San Francisco. And the city is actively trying to lure businesses back to its downtown, which has been hollowed out to some degree. They're slumping tax revenue from the businesses leaving, and business leaders are pushing local officials to try to solve homelessness. But we aren't San Francisco, Carl. That's what everybody tells me. True, but that's what San Francisco used to say about Los Angeles. The 2 biggest issues that we are dealing with, that they are dealing with in San Francisco and every other city across the country, is a lack of coordinated effort in the entire geographic area and the high cost of housing. So my advice to us is let's not wait until we do look like San Francisco. Now let's take a look at 2 cities who have decided to be proactive about ending homelessness in our community.
We all recognize that the immediate issue that faces us are the chronic homeless that live on our streets in the downtown Hollywood area and along the 441 corridor. This is a very far-reaching issue. I'm so proud of this commission, stood steadfast along with those of us that have wanted to do this.
The homeless issue in Hollywood and in Florida and throughout the country and everywhere is not a simple one. It's not one that's just going to go away with some magic bullet. It's really an issue that is rather complex and diverse, and it's going to require some of our focused time and resources to have a way to manage it and assist it better, and that's really what we tried to do. And additionally, the pandemic has only complicated that. It's made people harder to identify, to get in touch with, and to really be able to assess what some of the needs are, because that's key, finding and then assessing. People don't just, in most cases, they don't just suddenly become homeless for no reason. We need to increase the bed capacity for the Hollywood homeless at the Broward Outreach Center. When we identify folks that need that, we have to have beds available for some place for them to go and to be able to stay while they are rehabilitated.
We have services available through our Community Development Division where we try to mitigate homelessness before it actually happens. You know, they take a lot of pride in identifying the risk of homelessness, whether it be issues, mental health issues, addiction issues, joblessness issues, and try to connect those folks with the services that are available through the continuum of care or through the city, through its partnerships, to try to mitigate the homelessness before it actually happens.
Those relationships with different organizations that maybe don't focus on Hollywood, but rather are active elsewhere in the county, to bring those resources here to help us get those folks off the street here in our city is going to be a big plus, to take advantage of, you know, the machine that's there with the continuum of care and all the different agencies. Thank you to Community Development for identifying funds and continuing perhaps to identify future funds that could help the police department and the city on the road toward rehousing, temporary rehousing, and all the different opportunities that we might have.
So this happens on a daily basis. Although Officer Chung is our resident expert, it's a much larger group of officers that are really involved in this process. It's department-wide, right? Our whole philosophy on policing is community-oriented policing, and it's not just our neighborhood team leaders or Officer Chung. It's really a community-wide philosophy, and that's what's important for the success of the story. You know, we didn't get into this kind of homeless issue overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But the more aggressive we are with trying to provide resources and accommodations or whatever it takes, the better position we're going to be as a city and really as a country. So.
I'm Brian Blunt. I'm with the City of Fort Lauderdale Police Department Homeless Outreach Department. Our mission is to provide outreach services to the individuals experiencing homelessness in Fort Lauderdale. It's been a very good program all in all, and hope to continue that success as we move forward here. We talk to them, we see some of those individuals daily. Some of these individuals are ready and receptive to services right away, and some, like I said, it takes time after time of visiting them for them to gain our trust or to change their mindset about where they're at and what they're trying to, or if they're trying to get off the streets. This is my partner, Scott. Scott's been with the city about 14 years as well. Say hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
We're looking for a couple of individuals that we deal with on a regular basis who we're trying to get assistance for, and we're just kind of letting them know that we're here to help, and you know, we'll be back tomorrow if they don't want any help today, and we'll keep continuing to come back until they're ready to get some help. Whenever you're ready.
7 days. In June.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm not flying back with them. I'm not going back with them.
Whenever you're ready to go back, we'll get you a ticket.
Yes,
Just for the record, I think what both of these guys are doing is an immense thing. You guys are both taking care of the public.
We appreciate that. Scott, you want to head to Oakland and Fed? It's a very good feeling when you know that your accomplishments or your efforts have been rewarded by a success story. So it makes me continue to drive and want to continue to come out here and work harder every day. Here's what I would love for you to do. No force you at all. Get down to City Hall tomorrow. Okay, that's your community court meets. It's 9 a.m. Community court is a court that we have in the city of Fort Lauderdale. It's a holistic court. We try to help the homeless. We attempt to get them the services that they can use and need. We'll get you in a detox, get you clean, okay? And talk to Taskforce while you're there as well. Hopefully we can, once you're clean, we can get you either through Bark's program into something or through the Taskforce into something where you get a permanent program. I hope you enjoyed our ride along today and got a little bit to see what we do and how we help people out in the city. And next time you get to ride along with my partner and have a good time.
As you can see from the data we collected over 2022, Taskforce has a very good relationship with local law enforcement officers, as well as the 2 cities that were just featured. When you look at our community calls for service, or what we call our street requests, you'll see that we've had 272 calls for service that we tracked in 2022, with the top sources of those recourses coming from law enforcement officers, Broward County, concerned neighbors, and the Hollywood and City of Fort Lauderdale staff. Our hope is that more cities will become as involved as they are, those 2 cities in particular, in helping us solve this issue. Now let's look at the unsheltered population in Broward County and what the demographics of that population look like. When you look at this graph, there's a couple of things that particularly stand out to you. You can see that persons who identify as Black are overly represented in the population of the homeless individuals versus Broward County's population, which is only 30.6 compared to the 66% in the homeless population. Also, the 2 largest categories of people in terms of age that are homeless are between 35 up to 54. And that'll become more important as we talk about some of the solutions and what types of services we need to have available for people. And here we can see what disabilities people are dealing with on the streets. So as you can see, mental health, there were 38% of people who reported a disability of mental health status during the year. This is 2022. In physical health, 27% of the individuals reported having a physical health disability. But you'll also notice at the bottom that 40% of the people reported they had no disabilities. And again, this will be important when we start to talk about what types of services and the extent and the breadth of services that we have to have available for people. The unfortunate fact is that there are still a lot of people who think that substance abuse and mental health issues cause homelessness. That is a myth. And here's a perfect example, or here's a perfect way that the numbers show that. According to statistics in Broward County, 237,500 people abused illicit drugs in the past month. That's an estimate. Obviously, they didn't see everybody doing that, hopefully anyway. But they did have an estimate of that. And these are surveys that are done community-wide throughout Broward County when dealing with substance abuse and mental health. But you can see the numbers: 237,000 people, 148,000 people, 404,000 people. And yet, Taskforce only came into contact with 5,000 different people that were homeless or unsheltered during all of 2022. Which means if substance abuse and mental health really were the cause of homelessness, wouldn't there be hundreds of thousands of people that we would have come in contact with that would be sleeping out on the streets right now? In fact, most substance abusers or people who are dealing with mental health issues are housed. They're housed in our community. So it's definitely not the primary cause of homelessness. Now, that's not to say that those factors are not exacerbated by being on the streets. Sometimes someone will start out not being a substance abuser and end up being a substance abuser after spending time out on the streets. Same with mental health. There are a lot of stressors and a lot of traumas that go along with being homeless. And so these issues are more often caused after people become homeless rather than before they become homeless. Now let's look at veterans who are homeless. And to me, honestly, as a veteran myself, these are despicable numbers, because anything over 1 or anything over 0 is honestly just a tragedy to our entire system in the United States, where veterans will spend their evenings out on the streets. But when you look at our numbers here, you see that we actually don't have a lot of veterans that are out on the streets. We have 94 that were counted in the 2023 point in time count and 34 that were sheltered for a total of just 128 veterans. For the chronically homeless veterans, again, the people that have been out there a really long time and have a diagnosed disability, there were 43 of those. But you'll notice in both of these numbers, the numbers have gone up. And that's just an unacceptable situation for us here in this county. It's a 9.4% increase in veteran homelessness overall. And when we look at the chronically homeless population, or the people, again, who are spending more time out in the streets or have a disability, length of time out on the streets, you'll notice again that the numbers go up from 388 in 2022 to 624 in 2023, and the percentage rises from 17.5 to 25% of the population that are unsheltered in the point of time count. That's a 7.5% increase in chronic homelessness. Sorry, it's unsheltered and sheltered. Misspoke there. It won't be the last time, I'm sure. Now let's take a look at some data from our overall system to see what it tells us. Surprise, surprise. Housing is expensive in Broward County. I'm sure nobody could have predicted that this was going to be brought up in a presentation about homelessness, right? Housing is expensive. In fact, in one study, the annual income needed to afford a one-bedroom apartment now in Broward County is about $59,120 a year, or an hourly income of about $28.42 an hour for a full-time job. But you'll also notice that 43% of people who are unsheltered have some kind of income. And that's from data that we've gathered directly from them and observations that we've seen specifically from them about them working while they're out on the streets. They just do not have enough income to get into and or maintain housing. And it doesn't look like it's getting any better based off of these statistics for evictions. If you'll notice, back in 2021 and 2020, the evictions kind of stagnated a little bit with COVID relief funds. And now that those are going away, you'll notice that the evictions have already started to rise as early as August of 2022, and it's only getting worse. So let's look at how our COC, or our continuum of care, our homeless response system, if you will, is set up to handle homelessness. This slide shows the number of people we could be serving if our programs were working to maximum efficiency. And there's a lot of reasons that we may or may not be working at maximum efficiency. But if you look at these numbers and you look at what we could be doing, these are things that we're striving for as a continuum of care. So in the emergency shelter, we have we have 873 beds currently available. We could be serving with that if people only had to spend 60 days within the shelter. We could serve over 5,000 people. Roughly, our entire homeless population could be served if they were only there for 2 months. But if they stay for as long as 6 months, then it reduces down to only 1,700 people. And that's why right now we're having a problem with shelter beds, not being able to get people into those beds. Then when we look at transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing, you'll see here that transitional housing and rapid rehousing, in those circumstances, we could serve twice as many people if we could turn over those beds, or we could move people through those program slots once every 6 months. The problem is, if we take 2 years to do so, we can only do half of the capacity that we currently have. But if you'll notice with permanent supportive housing, which as its name suggests, is most often permanent, even at a maximum, and I was pretty conservative here, but it's pretty realistic as well, to have a turnover of about 10% possibly in permanent supportive housing programs, we would only be able to serve 117 new people each year. And right now we're running into that situation where there just are not enough beds turning over, or we don't have enough beds so that we can move more people into those. But you'll see with the rapid rehousing units, we could serve up to 1,200 versus 117 in permanent supportive housing. And now let's compare how our system looks to what a high-performing system might look like. And this is information and data that I've gathered not only from years of experience, but talking with my colleagues in the field, talking with my colleagues across the nation, and asking them kind of what a perfect system would look like. And when we look at our current bed allocation and what the percentages are for that, our transitional housing is almost right in line with where it should be. It's 12.2%, and a high-performing system would have about 15%. Rapid rehousing is significantly lower than it should be. Right now, 31% of our beds are rapid rehousing beds, and in fact, our high-performing system allocation would have about 60% of the units, total units, be rapid rehousing. And again, this goes back to think about the age of the people that we were trying to serve and how many people are working with no disabilities out on the streets. This is the type of housing that those people could get into if we had more beds available for them. And then permanent supportive housing. We have almost double the amount of permanent supportive housing beds that we would need if we were a high-performing continuum of care. And I'm going to show you kind of how that works. Because as you can see here, the system we have in place is designed to do what I've affectionately or not affectionately called growing our homeless population. So you'll notice the transitional and rapid rehousing are for people who have less issues and have been homeless for a less amount of time. The people in permanent supportive housing are the ones that have higher issues and have been on the streets longer. So when we set up our system so that all the beds or most of the beds are in the back end of the system, effectively what we're doing is we're telling people who are not disabled and don't have lengthy times of homeless to wait. We're telling them to wait on the streets. We're telling them you have to wait until you either become disabled or until you spend enough time out on the street, and then we'll be able to offer housing to you. So we've got to change this trend, and we've got to turn that around. You also notice that 20% of the homeless population, or the total population in a high-functioning system, should have already been diverted from these numbers. They should have been diverted or reunified back to housing options that they didn't even have to come into our system for. So let's take a moment to review the data we've covered. I kind of want to give a summary, and I kind of want to go over some of the things that we've talked about here so we can be really clear on exactly what we're looking at in our system. At least 2,487 people are homeless on any one night, sheltered and unsheltered, in Broward County. Unsheltered homelessness is increasing. Family homelessness is increasing. Chronic homelessness is increasing. And veteran homelessness is increasing. I don't know if you've noticed a trend, but homelessness is on the rise. And it's on the rise in almost every category. We still have work to do to understand and utilize our data effectively. This isn't even all the data that we could have collected or we have available to us. We're still working on those issues, and data is going to be one of the biggest issues that we have to deal with when we're working on our system and making it better. Cities must be more involved in ending homelessness in our community. Homelessness is a county-wide issue, and as you can see, there's no single person, agency, or even city, or even county that can solve this by themselves. We've all got to work on this. Household incomes must increase. We do not have enough safe, affordable, accessible housing for everyone that is homeless out on the streets or in a shelter. We don't have enough rapid rehousing units in our system. We may be very close to ending veteran homelessness, though, and that may be one of the lights that we can look to in this tunnel as we're trying to build a better system. So what can be done? I've always kind of been two ways about this quote from Winston Churchill, but in a lot of ways, when we're talking about big social issues or we're talking about big issues that we have to deal with here in the United States, oftentimes it kind of seems like it's true. You know, we work and we work and we work on a lot of different possibilities, and then eventually we get to the right one. But we go through a lot of wrong ones before we get there. So first, let me take a moment to suggest a national initiative which could change the situation of homelessness for thousands in our country as well as Broward County if this were instituted. And this is a little bit high level, so you may have to go back and look at the recording later to really kind of understand what's going on here. But I just wanted to put this out here in case there's anyone out there who happens to be speaking with their state representatives or anyone in a political system, particularly at the federal level, who could help us with this. But public housing authorities should prioritize serving people who are homeless. And right now, the best we have is a preference for them. Even the best PHAs or public housing authorities don't serve most of the people that are homeless. They're primarily serving people who show up first, people who can comply with the rules of the program to the T, those that have the least number of barriers, and those that understand how to negotiate the system. And unfortunately, when you're homeless out on the streets and you're dealing with survival day to day, these do not apply to most of the people that we're working with. This practice is known as creaming. And how do we know that it's known as creaming? Because in our continuum of care, in our homeless response system, the one that I've been a part of for 29 years, we used to do this. This used to be how we actually worked. We used to wait at our office until people showed up, and then we would try and help them. And guess who was coming to our office? The people who could show up first, the people who could comply with the rules, the people who had the least number of issues, and the people who understand how to negotiate the system. So we were doing this before until HUD got wise and said, you know what, you can't do that anymore. And they've mandated now that our continuum of care homeless response system has to serve the people that are the hardest to serve. But they haven't done it for the public housing authorities. And how do we know this is true? Because people are currently sitting on waiting lists for subsidized housing with public housing authorities for years. And many of them, up to 90% in some cases when I've looked at the data, never show up in our homeless response system during that time. Where are they at? They're housed. They may be poor. They may be low income. They may need some kind of subsidized housing. I'm not disputing that. I'm saying that is true. But why should they be prioritized over people who are literally sleeping on the streets? And you may say, well, Carl, this is your data. This is what you're seeing, and this is what you think. But what I actually did is I actually found a public housing authority survey that they did themselves. This was a national survey done with public housing authorities. And as you can see, they know they don't serve many people who are homeless. If you look at these questions and how they've responded to these, homeless applicants with no fixed address often get removed from their waiting list, 46%. Homeless households do not have the needed eligibility documentation. 28% of them said that's true. Because of the barriers, homeless households need housing search and landlord negotiation assistance, which they don't offer to the individuals. 16% of them said that's true, which, by the way, leads to them being removed from the housing list. There's a high turnover among homeless households, resulting in higher administrative or operating costs. They believe this to be true. And then finally, they said they cannot afford to serve homeless households that are zero income or extremely low income. So they're effectively saying they cannot and they will not serve our homeless population. What I'm offering is 3 options for HUD to consider. And again, HUD is over both. HUD is over our continuum of care and our homeless service systems and over our public housing authorities. They're over both of us. We're both in the same department. And they're treating us completely different. They're treating our systems as if they're 2 separate systems who are trying to do 2 separate things. So what I'm offering up is that there are options here for HUD to consider. The first one is, what if HUD required that public housing authorities could only offer vouchers or fill their subsidized units to homeless people until there were no people without housing, and then move to the people who need it, who are low income, or the people who are struggling. I'm not saying we don't want to serve them. What I'm saying is serve people who are literally homeless first. Or what if HUD required PHAs to only issue vouchers through the coordinated entry continuum of care system. So come to us. We'll give you the people who you should be giving vouchers to. Or finally, what if HUD just automatically placed our people, when we identified them as homeless, on their wait list for housing vouchers? And they didn't have to try to call in at 8 o'clock on a Monday to some, dial-up service or whatever the case is, and get in within the first 3 minutes before the HUD wait list closes. And the numbers work for this solution. If you look at what the numbers are for public housing units, we currently have about 1.3 million public housing units. And we currently have 1.479 million Section 8 vouchers, which means if we added 20% more of those units that we could serve homeless individuals with, the number of people estimated, it would serve about 555,800 people. And again, that's just 20% more than what they're serving currently, which I would guess is less than 10%. I haven't found a public housing authority yet that is serving more than 10% or using more than 10% of these vouchers for homeless individuals. But if we did that, if you look at the number of people that were estimated to be homeless in 2022 on any given night, 582,000, you would almost effectively end homelessness in the United States. That sounds pretty good to me. So let's look at local solutions. And what I really want to focus on here is I want to focus on the top four. The top four to me are the most important, and they're not in any specific order. I just put them up there as I saw them come up with the data. And I think these are reasonable things that we can work on in our continuum of care. Number one, we need to add more rapid rehousing units to our system. And I know it's tough, and I know it's hard to find housing units out there that are affordable, obviously, and it's hard to get people into housing and keep them there and all of those things. I know we have some obstacles to overcome, but we've got to figure out a way to be able to add more units there for those people that are not disabled, that can work, that haven't been out in the streets for over a year, because there are a lot of them out there just waiting for housing. We need to do a push, and we need to eliminate veteran homelessness. There's no reason for us to still have veteran homelessness here in Broward County. When you're talking about 100 or less than 200 people that we could be serving out there, there's no reason for us not to eliminate that and just get rid of veteran homelessness altogether and move on to another subset category of people who are homeless. Provide more solutions for families to regain housing. And there's several different things that I've mentioned here. Diversion programs, reunification programs, providing services to people while they're out on the streets, trying to get the families in particular into housing faster and into housing more effectively. And then finally, we have to get more cities actively involved in working to address homelessness. And I'm not saying that every city has to pony up $10 million. I know that's not realistic, and I know that's not what most cities have the capability to do. But what I am saying is put something in the pot and make it a coordinated effort. Go to the county, who is the COC or Continuum of Care lead agency, and work with them and collaborate with them and put money towards the initiative of ending homelessness across the entire county. It's going to take more than just 1 or 2 or 3 cities to be able to end homelessness in Broward County. And just like we saw with the city by city examples of the point in time count, it's like that old water balloon trick that you used to do when you were a kid. You remember? You squeezed in one end and all of a sudden it got big in another part. That's all we're doing. If we're not ending homelessness across the entire county, we're not doing it collectively or collaboratively together, all we're doing is pushing the issue from one side of the street to the other side of the street. So next year, instead of someone being homeless in Fort Lauderdale, they'll be homeless in Lauderhill. Or instead of being homeless somewhere else, they'll be homeless somewhere else. Hollywood to Davie, so on and so forth. And we'll just keep going back and forth, and the people will just move around. That's not solving it. We need to engage business and industry leaders, particularly around the idea of increasing income and figuring out how we can get more people to work that want to work, but we've got to have that housing for them first, or it's not going to be stable enough. And then we've got to look at other types of affordable housing, such as single room occupancy units, and adding diversion and targeted prevention programs as well. So let's take a minute or two to answer some of your questions that you might have while I'm here, while I'm just available, I guess.
Okay, so some of the questions that came in earlier.
Okay.
We have, don't some people choose to be homeless?
Don't some people choose to be homeless? This is a big myth. And effectively, the easiest way to put it to you is, do you choose not to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs? It's not within your capability. Can't do it. Our system has not been set up so that everybody can get through it yet, or everybody can get through it easily. So when people are telling you that they choose to be homeless, what they're really saying is, you don't have anything you can offer me. I don't believe that what you're selling me is going to help me. And in fact, most of the people, in fact, I would argue more than 90% of the people that are currently homeless in our system have already tried our programs. And for whatever reason, it didn't work for them. The one that they chose, or the one they tried to do, or the one that tried to get them out of homelessness yet. So it's easier for them to say, you know what, I'd rather be homeless than deal with whatever the issues are and go through the disappointment again. Because what we've learned as human beings is that if we try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, then we develop what we call learned helplessness. And at that point, you don't have many solutions. And oftentimes, the only solution, from what people have told me on the streets, is to kill themselves, honestly. That's the only solution they have at that point, because they don't see a way out of it. So what they're really saying is, I don't think you can help me. And it's our job at Taskforce, and it's our job as a continuum of care and as community members to let them know, number one, they're loved, and number one, they're supported, and we will help them find a way to get out of their situation.
Does welfare prevent people from becoming homeless?
Does welfare prevent people from becoming homeless? This is a good question. Sometimes, yes, but ironically, what most of the prevention studies have shown is that we can't predict who's going to become homeless or not. So even people who are currently struggling and have to receive some type of, Medicaid or food stamp assistance or, temporary assistance for needy families or whatever other types of programs they might be, or other types of subsidies they might be, the reality is that we don't know. We don't know who's going to become homeless. We cannot predict that. Do they help? Probably, yes. But the reality is that sometimes it's people who we never would have thought would become homeless. So yes, they help, but we don't know how they help yet, and we don't know the extent to which they help yet. We just don't have the data that shows us how it's affecting or how we're doing that, which is why in one of my slides I suggested as a possible solution, really targeted prevention. There have been a couple of studies done recently that have started targeting and figuring out or trying to look at factors that may increase someone's probability that they'll become homeless, and trying to target them with those types of programs and things like that.
Why should the business community support initiatives to end homelessness?
Because it affects everyone, and the business community knows this more than anybody because we get calls from them all the time. We get calls. They see it. And you saw the slide that I put up about San Francisco and their business community. If we want Broward County to look like that, if we want Broward County to start getting rid or driving away businesses because of homelessness, because people are out in the streets, because there is no affordable housing, because of these issues, well, then that's what's going to end up happening. So we need business leaders to engage with us, to talk with our continuum of care, to figure out how they can be a part of the solution with us, to help bring resources to the table, but also help bring knowledge, help us bring strategies, help us bring new ideas. Again, that's the idea of this State of the Street address, is to help us generate new ideas, help us think differently about this, and help us understand what we can do and how we can try and solve some of these bigger, more complex issues. All right. So we are so grateful to all the community members who have asked us a vital question. What can we do to help? Here are some suggestions of things to do to help us end homelessness in our community. You can donate. Obviously, we need more resources that are targeted towards helping people get out of homelessness. You can volunteer, particularly on the point in time count. We love having volunteers out. And the other thing it does is it gives you a real view and allows you to be able to talk to people that are experiencing this so you can understand what their situation is. And then finally, advocate. Again, things like the big changes that I recommended for the national level or federal level are not going to change unless people advocate for those types of things. And finally, you can follow us on social media and learn more and educate yourself more about homelessness, learn more about what we do, and try to become more involved in what we're trying to do here in our community. I want to thank all of you for watching this broadcast, and I hope you will help us end homelessness for our neighbors in need. Have a great day.